The content, views, and opinions expressed in the following program are those of the producer and do not necessarily reflect the view and opinions of the City of Bremerton, BCAT, their officials, or their employees.
Hello, and welcome to Leadership Kitsap Alumni Spotlight, where both the host and guest are alumni of our local 10-month leadership development course. This program shines a spotlight on just one of the several hundred graduates who have given countless hours of their time and effort to make things happen here in Kitsap through leadership. I'm your host, Irene Moyer, class of 2022, and Vice President at the Greater Kitsap Chamber. And joining me today is Martin Cockroft, class of 2017, and Vice President of Instruction at Olympic College. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so we're just going to jump right into it. We've never met before today, and so I'm excited to hear about your Leadership Kitsap experience. So you were the class of 2017.
Yes.
What led you to Leadership Kitsap?
Well, I work for Olympic College, and I don't think I might have heard of Leadership Kitsap before doing it, but I wasn't very familiar with it.
Okay.
And Olympic College has typically sponsored at least 2 employees to go through the Leadership Kitsap program each year. And I believe we were talking about David Emmons. I believe David Emmons reached out to me and asked if I'd be interested in participating in the program. And after learning more about it, I did apply and ended up doing it.
Wonderful. And how long have you been at OC?
I started at Olympic College in July of 2013.
Okay.
So that would make this my 12th year.
Nice. And tell me a little bit about what exactly you do at the college.
Sure. So I'm the Vice President of Instruction at the college, which is the Chief Academic Officer. So I oversee the academic enterprise of the college, which includes all of our academic divisions, and the deans who oversee those divisions. The deans oversee all of our faculty and the programs. So, for instance, we have a healthcare division, and in it we have our nursing programs, and we have physical therapy assistant, medical assisting, and those are all in that division. So I oversee the dean that oversees those divisions and the faculty who teach in those programs. And I'm ultimately responsible for the curriculum of the college, for the programs that we offer, for reviewing those programs to make sure that they're doing well. I also oversee the dean of the libraries and e-learning, and so it's a fairly large job.
Sounds like it. That's a lot of responsibility, and a lot of leadership skills. I think that probably go into that. So, when you were approached about becoming part of the Leadership Kitsap program, what were your thoughts going into it, and what were your expectations?
I don't know that I had a lot of expectations. I think one of the things that, just practically speaking, I had to sort of block off one Friday every month to participate in the program and really commit to that.
Yeah.
I wasn't in this role at the time.
Okay.
So my responsibilities were a little bit different, but at the same time, I was still pretty busy. So just being willing to make that commitment. Mm-hmm. And then I remember going to kind of our first orientation session where we got these big binders and kind of walked through what the curriculum would be like and what our year would look like. So I think that helped to set my expectations, but kind of going into it, I actually wasn't really sure what the program would be like.
Okay. Mentioning that you weren't in the same role then as you are now, can you share a little bit about kind of that leadership journey from 2017 to the present?
Yeah, so I actually started at Olympic College as the Director of Applied Bachelor's Degree Development. So for those unfamiliar with what that means, and I actually wasn't totally sure at the time what that role entailed, Olympic College offers bachelor's degrees, and it's becoming more common, but starting in about maybe 2009, I think was the state's pilot program for community colleges offering bachelor's degrees, which was pretty unusual at the time.
Yeah.
Even nationwide, there were only a handful of states that permitted community colleges to offer bachelor's degrees. Mm-hmm. When Washington State started that pilot, our first degree was our Bachelor's of Science in Nursing, and it was one of the first 4 bachelor's degrees that community colleges offered in the state of Washington.
Okay.
After that, the college decided, and this was in 2013 when I was hired, to hire a director for the development of those degrees because we wanted to do several more of them. So I was hired, and we worked on, the first degree we worked on was information systems, and then we did a degree in organizational leadership and technical management, and then a degree in filmmaking. So my role was to work with faculty on the development of those degrees, and then make sure that we could get through our college processes and approvals, state approval, our accrediting body approval, and ultimately offer those programs. So that's the role I was kind of transitioning from that role. When I started at Leadership Kitsap, I was transitioning from that role into the director of our Teaching and Learning Center. And that was a role where I was responsible to work with all of our faculty on professional development programming, particularly around teaching, learning, and assessment.
Okay. All of those seem like really big roles. I know I worked in higher education for many years in a previous life, and that was something that I found really interesting coming here and seeing the bachelor's degrees that were offered at a community college. So that's interesting to hear about the evolution of that.
Yeah.
So I digress a little bit.
Yeah.
So talking a little bit about your Leadership Kitsap experience, obviously you had a big job going on at that time, and there are different requirements that the signature program has, including those challenge days that you mentioned, but there's also that component of a community service project.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about what your project was and your teammates?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that really is the core, I think, of the Leadership Kitsap experience. And it's probably when I think back on my time in Leadership Kitsap, that's what comes most readily to mind. So yeah, I think our team was formed fairly early on in the year, and we were a pretty interesting group. So there were 2 law enforcement officers.
Okay.
We had the director for communications and marketing from Kitsap Transit. And someone working in HR from the Sklallam tribe. And so I remember one of the first things we did as a team was kind of in terms of bonding exercises was that we did the Strengths Finder and then the personality assessment, Myers-Briggs, and then kind of compared, where we were. And I remember with one individual in particular, Jeff Mingy, actually, who's still involved with Leadership Kitsap, and I think is the chief of patrol for the sheriff's office in Kitsap County. We looked at our Myers-Briggs, and we were the exact opposite in all of those 4 dimensions that they cover. And so there was some lively conversation about that, and we ended up getting along really well. The group, I think, gelled. We were all pretty busy. I think we all had families at the time with kids at home. And so we ended up meeting on Saturday mornings, early in the morning at Central Market, what was then called Central Market in Paulsbo, at something like 7 in the morning on Saturday, because that was the only time we could find to do the work as a team. In terms of our project, we wanted to do something that related to education. Again, we all had kids in school. As parents were committed to our kids, but also committed to the public education in Kitsap County. And so we ended up working with Kingston Middle School on developing a conflict management club for Kingston Middle School in partnership with the Dispute Resolution Center. And so that was I thought it was a great process. It was, we ended up forming the club. I learned actually very recently from the director of the Dispute Resolution Center that the club that we formed continued until the pandemic and then stopped meeting, and they haven't had a chance to restart it yet. But ultimately our goal was to help middle school students engage more productively in conflict, to learn how to do that. And ultimately we were hoping that might lead into some kind of peer mentoring program. Okay.
Did you get in and work with students as part of that project, or was it just really more kind of setting up the parameters for a group like that?
Well, a little of both. So most of it, for most of the year, that was working with the DRC as well as Kingston Middle School staff to kind of set up the club. What would it be like? Who would attend it? And then ultimately we did have a day where we invited youth who were interested in the club to meet with us. I think we did it at Heronswood, actually, and talked a little bit about, kind of what the club was, about conflict itself, and it was sort of a full-day field trip for the kids.
Okay. Wow. Did you have any challenges as a group? And if so, what do you think might have been your biggest challenge?
Yeah, I think probably, one of the things that comes to mind is just actually making sure that you're like on time and tracking with all of the kind of getting it off the ground, because every one of the projects that you do in Leadership Kitsap can kind of grow to the point where it's difficult to accomplish. So we wanted to find something that was really concrete, that we had kind of, defined outcomes that we could meet. And I think we did do that. I think it kind of probably pulled some of us, out of our comfort zone as well. I've been in education most of my life, but not everybody had been. And so, and working with middle school students is certainly different than working with college students.
Right.
So I guess that was a little challenging in a good way. Yeah.
And what would you say was your favorite part of that project and working with that team?
I think just probably the team building parts were really important to us. So, in addition to the meeting times that we had separate from, challenge days for Leadership Kitsap, we would, hang out together. I know that we had some get-togethers as a team. We're still in communication with each other, and
nice.
Still get together sometimes at the alumni events that Leadership Kitsap holds, or things outside of that, because we're I think 4 out of 5 of us are still in the community.
Okay.
One of our team members moved away, but so those relationships have been long lasting, and I think we really came to trust each other as a group. We had very different roles, so to be honest, I had never had a relationship with a friendship really with law enforcement professionals. So that was good for me to kind of see what their work was like, and to kind of understand that better and see how they're serving our community. And likewise with education. And then I think learning from them too, they were all leaders in their own areas, and so kind of learning how they led and was productive for me in my own leadership journey.
Okay. Were there any standout folks for you in the Leadership Kitsap program, whether it be your teammates, other members of your cohort, Leadership Kitsap leadership? Were there any standouts for you, folks that served as mentors for you as you went through the program, or even after?
Yeah, I think, again, what comes to mind is the team that, my team for our project, we called ourselves the Conflict Crushers, just for fun. And you know how you form teams like that, and you have lots of inside jokes, and you just get to know each other well. We spent a lot of time together.
Yeah.
And so, I would say like preeminently them. Katie Walters was the executive director at the time. I thought she did such a good job of leading Leadership Kitsap and helping us understand kind of what we were doing there and what we were there for. We had lots of great speakers on our challenge days, I think. Like I can recall, and I'm not going to remember all of their names, but we had one particular challenge day learning from executive leaders at least 3 organizations. And I know one of those was Town and Country Markets. One of them was Watson Furniture, and the other was Puget Sound Naval Shipyard. And so we got to hear from the executive leaders of each of those organizations. And that was really interesting for me. I don't think I had ever considered being in executive leadership at that time. Just to go back a little bit more to my story, I started in education as a faculty member and teaching English, and particularly creative writing. And so when all those years ago, I had assumed that would be my career. So, I'd never really thought of myself as a vice president or being in executive leadership, but hearing from those leaders, I think helped me to kind of see a little more of the human face of what leadership looks like.
Sure.
And to see the humility that they offered. I remember, I think it's Cliff McKenzie from Watson Furniture. It was talking about somebody had asked him, like, what's the most difficult part of your job? And he said, the most difficult part of my job is firing someone. He said, it's always hard to let someone go. Right. And so seeing that compassion that he had, even in, the situation where, he might be totally justified in letting someone go. It just was interesting for me to see that, what they were grappling with as leaders. So, yeah, we had lots of really interesting challenge days with people that we interacted with.
Nice. I love that story. Cliff is always
Yeah.
a great speaker, and
Yeah.
I think really kind of impacts a lot of the students in our cohorts. All right, so let's talk a little bit about skills and lessons learned from your time in the signature program. Obviously, again, you came into it with a lot of leadership skills already, as well as your team members. Were there any particular aha moments, things you really took away of, like, I know how to do this now that I've gone through this program, or this will help me to do something better?
That's a great question. I think it's hard sometimes to quantify what you learn in a program,
Right.
In terms of kind of what you bring into it and what you're taking away from it. I'm not sure. I think, like, one of the things that I've taken from the program is just leadership is, for me, it's about serving others. Even I was thinking about the term administrator, and we administer the college, and that term comes this has the same root as minister, like we think of in churches. And so I really do think, like, the role of leaders is to serve those that they lead. And that came through loud and clear in the Leadership Kitsap program, certainly through the folks that I interacted with on my team, and then all of the people in the program itself. Each of us had to do kind of an individual presentation as well of what we learned in the program. And so just seeing people from all these different sectors in Kitsap County in lots of different roles with different responsibilities, I was impressed by all of them. It was, I think, kind of affirming and encouraging to see that all of our organizations that were represented in Leadership Kitsap were in good hands with the individuals that were representing them. Kind of reassuring in a way, because you don't always know that about people.
Yeah.
So I took that away. I think listening, I've tried since Leadership Kitsap to be a person who leads by listening, and not just in a perfunctory way, but honestly to come to something and say, okay, I can change. I might do this a different way if I get input that suggests that a different way is the best way to go. I think good things happen when you put a lot of leaders together, or folks who are on that kind of leadership journey. That's probably what I took away the most.
Okay, thanks. Obviously, you have a big day job with a lot of responsibilities, but have you found other opportunities to maybe exercise that servant leadership that you just talked about?
Yeah, so like in terms of kind of service in our community,
Yeah, right.
So I guess in different ways. So one of the things that I do in our community is that I'm a musician as well.
Oh, wow.
And so I've had the chance to lead music at different churches in the area, and just not necessarily always in a permanent role, but in a way to just to kind of give back with some of my abilities. And I was involved for a long time, probably in fact during the Leadership Kitsap years, I was involved in North Kitsap Soccer Club. So I served on their, this kind of comes readily to mind, but I served on their executive team as, I think my title was Vice President of Maintenance, which is kind of hilarious. But it was really different than my day job, in the sense that I spent a lot of time ordering soccer balls and jerseys, and maintaining an equipment shed. That's what it was, Vice President of Equipment, now that I think about it. But at any rate, but I think like that involvement in community organizations is really important too.
Okay, wonderful. Do you think that your time with Leadership Kitsap, and maybe this is a loaded question because I feel like all of our alumni probably would answer positively, but do you think that your time with Leadership Kitsap helped to strengthen you, to get you where you are, to build you more as a leader, or was it more, I guess, the experience of the project and things like that?
Yeah, I think it's both. I mean, I think it's relationship building with the people that are part of the program, and again, particularly with your team. Hopefully, every team has that experience of building a strong kind of team together, and then having long-lasting relationships with the people that you're on a team with. So, yeah, I think in terms of kind of my own leadership journey, I think one of the things is probably giving me some support in terms of seeing myself as somebody who could be in a leadership role.
Yeah.
Obviously, like, leaders are not necessarily people who are are vice presidents. They don't have to be vice presidents, and there's the concept of kind of lead from wherever you are. But I think kind of kind of pulling back the veil a little bit on leadership, and on people who did have more functional responsibility for their organizations helped me to see that could be a possibility for me. I'm not necessarily somebody who's been particularly ambitious around position. I've always been ambitious about the work I do.
Yeah.
And so I think Leadership Kitsap kind of helped me to see that, I didn't have to have, it's not just an either or kind of decision. I can be somebody who's responsible for a lot of people, and for a big part of an organization, and do that well, and do that kind of authentically with who I am. I think I'd had kind of maybe even a kind of caricature of who leaders are based on kind of a lot of the figures that we see most prominently. And you don't have to be Jeff Bezos, you don't have to be Elon Musk. You can be a lead in your own way. And so being exposed to people who were doing that through Leadership Kitsap was super useful for me in that.
Okay. I love that.
Yeah.
Anyone can be a leader.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sitting down with me today. I think those are all the questions that we have time for.
Okay. You're welcome.
And thank you for joining us for this episode of Leadership Kitsap Alumni Spotlight. If you want to become a part of a vibrant team working to build a new and continuing source of leaders right here in Kitsap County, reach out to us at leadershipkitsap.org, on Instagram, or on Facebook. And for the Leadership Kitsap Alumni Spotlight, I'm Irene Moyer. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.